definitely take the leadership role. There's times that we follow someone else that has the leadership role.
And if it is someone else, does it usually FEMA or other government organizations? Or do you follow Red Cross or Salvation Army, for example, like national non-profits?
Well, any disaster starts locally and ends locally. So it doesn't matter how much experience we have and go in with. If that local leadership, whether it's emergency manager or who it is, the mayor, whoever it is, if they don't want something done or they do want something done, it's their disaster. It's not ours. So we're there to support them and not to, we'll support them, we'll advise them, but we do not go against them as far as like FEMA or someone. FEMA does not tell any nonprofit what they can and can't do. We are our own boss per se, but we don't do things that are going to be detrimental or against what that community desires, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does. Another actually interesting thing that I was thinking, you mentioned that you went to Puerto Rico, to the Virgin Islands, and how do you make decision of kind of helping remotely versus actually going to the disaster and helping there?
Yeah, I always will be going. I don't do remote responses. So with the way we're set up, then I'm always going. Where I'm going is a long conversation on how I figure out where I'm going, because it takes a lot of different looks at different disasters. I look for the communities that are being overlooked. I don't watch what I call the CNN effect, to where, what happens a lot of times is they are concentrating on one community and everyone else is not mentioned, and so that's all people know. So they're all heading there. I do research and talk to people and look for the areas that have been heavily impacted but are not getting all that attention or all that help, and I'll go there. And of course, we always say it's like a three-legged stool. No matter where we go, you need to have the volunteer interest, you need to have the funding, and you need to have the need of the community. And if you don't have those three, then you might be able to operate on two of the three stool legs, but you're not going to work as well as if it's a solid foundation of all three.
Interesting. I love how you made analogy to the three-legged stool. And need volunteer and funding. Which one is always more challenging, or it depends on the situation?
It depends on the situation. It could be funding. It could be volunteers. The need is usually always there, or we wouldn't be there. But sometimes, if you're responding in a Bogalusa, Louisiana, volunteers aren't as interested in going to a place like that as they would be into a Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the Smoky Mountains. It's just people have their preferences of where they want to go and help, and it can be a struggle of volunteers when you go into those rural communities, but they're usually the ones that need the help the most. So in that case, like in Bogalusa, we were struggling more for volunteers. So what I do then is partner with AmeriCorps, and we'll call my AmeriCorps friends and say, do you have any NCCC volunteers that we can sponsor and bring in? And so they'll send in a team or two, and we feed them and house them and work them just like we would our own volunteers to help our numbers be a little stronger. And then you go to someplace like Harvey or an Irma, where the volunteers, everybody wanted to help, and we end up with 5,000 to 8,000 volunteers wanting to come in, and you've got too many volunteers, and you can't possibly bring them all in. then it's a whole different problem. So every disaster has got the same look of a foundation, but how you build on that foundation is always totally different.
Interesting. And what about Maria? Did you have enough volunteers with Maria?
Oh, yeah, we had way too many, and still do. But, you know, as the disaster gets out of people's mind or another disaster happens, you know, people drop that one and turn their attention to the new one. And so we always know that when we stay long-term as we do, because we've committed to Puerto Rico, for example, for 2 years, we know 6 months down the line, people's not going to care as much, and our volunteer interest is going to start dwindling.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't stop us from still making that commitment. As long as we have the resources to do it, we'll do it.
Fascinating. And also, Sherry, you mentioned that you look for the areas that kind of need more help, that are not covered by other agencies. And how do you find the information on those areas?
A lot of research. I will be looking. I'm constantly watching the weather. I'm listening to, you know, where they're saying how many miles say the tornado went or how far the flooding affected. And I look around the areas that you're hearing the big news talk about, unless that's the only big area impacted. And I will call emergency managers, see what their status is, and start gathering information. A lot of disasters, you can almost throw a dart,
mm-hmm.
you know, at a map, and wherever the dart lands, say, okay, that's it, because everyone's in need. But you just have to start narrowing down your search, and then we'll look at the poverty level, the disability level, and everything else to see where the people might be that are not having the means to help themselves as much.
Interesting. And in terms of collaboration, if you think about, again, funding, information, and materials, what do you think is usually more critical?
Well, you have to always have funding in order
mm-hmm.
to be able to do it. So funding always takes a big, big role in it. You know, I've done a lot of disasters where we just went in, stepped out on faith, I would say,
mm-hmm.
and went in without the funding, knowing that if we didn't find funding soon, then we would only be there for a short while. And so then you start checking foundations and local corporations and places that will help provide that funding. But funding is always an important factor in every organization's response, every nonprofit organization's response.
What about information?
Well, if you don't have the information, you don't know, so you're not even going to respond. So, you know, a lot of these things, they all go together. It's hard to pull them out separately and say, you know, this part's important or that's not, just like we were talking about with your triangle. They've all got to merge and come together somehow in order to make it be what it needs to be. So information's important. Like I said, that's how I know where I'm going, is gathering the information and trying to make a decision on what area we're going to. So information's important. But without that information, I wouldn't be going to the area. And if I'm going to the area, if I don't have any funding, I'm not going to be able to stay there and do what I need to do. So again, they are so tightly ingrained and together that there's no way of separating and saying one's more important than the other.
That's great. I was just, I ask those questions because I'm kind of interested in it, but I do completely agree with your point. A lot of things you can't just separate them because it's like, like an organism that you support from different sides.
Yes.
So I'm almost done with my questions. I always like to ask, is there something that you personally, as a member of All Hearts and Hands, are proud that you accomplished during Hurricanes Irma, Harvey, or Maria? Like, some story that you're personally proud of?
Yes, certainly. And we're all hands and hearts. I'm sorry to correct you on that, but everyone gets